teenager. This excerpt takes place when I was 15 years old, during the month I spent inpatient at UCLA's Adolescent Psych Hospital. I mentioned a character named Simon, who was a friend of mine who died when I was 8, and this excerpt takes place about halfway through the memoir. When the sleek, metallic elevator doors slid open onto the 8th floor, we were instantly swallowed by the pure darkness that lay ahead of us. Even without light, I could sense the room's size, a huge open area spanning the entire floor. The weak fluorescent glow emanating from the elevator was barely able to extend a few feet into the thick black beyond. "This is creepy," I said, my voice echoing out into the darkness. Randy, a bulky nurse with a shiny bald head, ventured out of the elevator and into the room. He fumbled around, swearing under his breath, until he was finally able to locate a light switch. The elevator doors lost their patience and began to close on us. I blocked them with my arm and gestured for Andrea, Lacey, Kelly, and Ben to get out before they had a chance to close again. Light flooded the room all at once. We were in a playground. A large, elaborate playground, even bigger than the kind you would find outside an elementary school. 3 separate slides connected to giant plastic structures made up of bridges and steps. There were metal monkey bars to hang from and small rungs on the wall for tiny hands to grasp and climb. A giant plastic tic-tac-toe board was attached to one of the synthetic walls. Since my arrival, I had been hearing rumors about there being a playground in the building, but Kelly was the only one who had actually seen this mythical place. She bugged Randy about it so much that he finally agreed to take a small group of us up there after dinner one night. Thanks to Kelly, I was chosen to be one of the select few. "This is so cool," Andrea said, before running over to one of the ladders leading up to a twisting blue slide. "It's not bad," Ben said, glancing over at me just long enough for my stomach to twist. I did my best to ignore the feeling. Ben and Kelly located a cluster of red tricycles. They each hopped onto one, the metal creaking loudly under their weights. A yellow striped track painted onto the carpet circled the perimeter of the playground. Kelly struggled to pedal forward along the track, stooped over, her long, chubby legs bumping into her arms. Even Ben, scrawny as he was, looked ridiculous riding the tiny tricycle. Lacey stood frozen next to me for a moment before quietly heading toward one of the structures. Randy leaned against a wall by the elevator doors with his arms crossed tightly against his chest. His expression was blank. He had seen this place many times before. The only connection to the outside world was through several tiny windows placed high up on the walls. They all had thick metal bars over them. I picked up a dull orange basketball and threw it against the wall, hitting a lion right in the face. He was one of the many animals in the mural on one of the side walls. The paint was chipped and fading. "Wait up, asshole," I heard Kelly yell behind me. I looked over my shoulder and let out a small laugh. Ben and Kelly raced along the painted track perimeter of the playground. Ben was far ahead of her, riding the tricycle with no hands. He came perilously close to slamming right into one of the cement walls, but gently pushed one of the handlebars to steer himself out of danger. Andrea paced back and forth across one of the rope bridges, watching the race with mild amusement. I wandered back over to Randy and asked, "Why is this here?" "Little kids stay here sometimes," he said. I nodded. It was time for me to explore. I ascended a set of stairs leading up to the top of a green slide. I sat on the edge for a moment before releasing my hands and leaning my body forward. On the way down, I felt electricity building around me and saw a tiny spark shock my arm. It immediately brought me back to the playground at my elementary school. I remembered waiting for those little shocks as I slid downward, hoping they wouldn't hurt. The anticipation always made it more exciting and scary. I reached the bottom quickly and jumped to my feet, the static momentarily clinging to my clothes as I disconnected myself from the smooth, hard surface. Across the playground, I saw Lacey sitting under a slide, having a conversation with someone who I couldn't see. I moved underneath the slide beside me and sat down on the green cushioned floor. I didn't see things like Lacey did, but there was someone I wanted to talk to. "Simon," I whispered, "I know you probably can't hear me, but I really need someone right now. I need help getting through this." There was no reply, as usual. I didn't really believe in God, and I didn't really pray, but I felt like I could talk to Simon. I could imagine his face in my mind, imagine him listening to me and caring about me, much more than I could some blurry, faceless man in the clouds. "I'm so sorry about what happened to you," I said. "You were so young and you had so much life ahead of you. It isn't fair. I'm alive, but I'm barely living. It should have been me. Sitting under that slide in a strange psych hospital playground, I truly believed that I'd disappointed him. I'd been wasting my life by living like I wanted to be dead. Would he have made better use of his time? Would he have been a better person? Would he have been happier, healthier, kinder, wiser than me? There was no way to know, but I couldn't help thinking that all of that was true. Tears began to blur my vision, but I pushed them away. I was so tired of crying. I hope you're okay, I said. I know we were never very close, and I didn't really get a chance to know you, but wherever you are, I hope you're okay. This playground was meant to bring a semblance of normal to this crazy place, but it really only made it more clear how off everything was. On the other side of the room, Andrea and Ben played catch with a slightly deflated basketball. Lacey had gotten in an argument with her invisible friend. Kelly chatted with Randy in the corner, telling him a story while waving her wounded arms around in the air. Maybe I would feel better if I stopped focusing on how wrong everything was and had a little fun. Maybe I could get lost in pretending, just like I had when I was a kid. Andrea, I called out as I emerged from my hiding place. Want to ride trikes with me? Sure, she said, tossing the basketball to Ben before walking away. Without missing a beat, Ben turned and began bouncing it against the wall. I squeezed myself onto one of the tricycles and managed to pedal alongside Andrea, who was concentrating hard on not tipping over whenever we hit a turn. My legs hurt immediately. Let's pretend we're little kids again, I said. Okay, she said. I was an annoying little kid, though, so watch out. I smiled as we pedaled along, two kids simply exploring the world around us. There was nothing to worry about here. There were no neuroses and diagnoses. There were no doctors or therapists. I couldn't help thinking that even as a kid, I had never really been carefree. But for now, we were simply pretending. Childhood could be anything I wanted it to be. It's time to go, Randy said. His deep voice boomed across the playground. I got off the tricycle and wobbled a little as I walked to the front of the room. Randy did a quick head count to make sure we were all present before pressing the small oval button to take us back down to 2 South. Kelly often woke everyone in the girls' hall in the middle of the night with her screaming. She dragged her mattress out into the hallway and plopped it down in front of the nurse's station, grunting and crying. I can't fucking sleep, she shrieked. It's too dark, it's cold, I don't want to be alone, fuck this place, I want to fucking die. When she wasn't freaking out, Kelly liked to organize events like movie parties. We gathered in her little hospital room in our pajamas like it was a sleepover. If you ignored the bars in the window, it could have been any teen girl's room. One night, Lacey, Andrea, and I all came to her showing of The Labyrinth, one of the few DVDs she owned. As we settled into the hard wooden chairs dragged in from around the ward, Lacey looked at one chair that had become displaced, facing outward into the room. There's a boy, she said. Huh? Kelly asked. I see a little boy sitting in that chair. Push it in. No one made a move. Push it in, she yelled. I got up and pushed the chair back into its spot under the desk. Is that better? I asked. She nodded. But there's still blood dripping down the walls, she said. I looked at the walls, wondering what the blood looked like, wondering how someone could so clearly see something that wasn't there. I thought for a moment about asking her what the little boy had looked like, but I decided I didn't want to know if it was him, if it could be Simon. I knew she was schizophrenic, but I also believed in ghosts. Whenever I spent time with Kelly, it was difficult not to stare at her arms. I'd never seen anything like them. First off, there were cuts and scars, some faded, some pink and fresh. Then there were the staples. Shiny glints of cold metal were pierced into her arms here and there. That night, as I was leaving her room, she pulled me into her chest for a hug. Kelly seemed to have taken a liking to me. In her embrace, the staples were closer to me than ever. Why did you do that? I asked. I could never put a staple in my arm. Didn't it hurt? Coming from me, the question seemed strange, but despite my attempts at self-injury, this was one form of harm I couldn't fathom doing to myself. No, she said, still holding me tight. It feels good. My psych ward crying fits continued on a near daily basis. The nurses had learned to ignore me and didn't even bother yelling at me anymore. One night, I went back to my room while the others were watching the news in the lounge. I didn't feel like I needed to hear what was going on in the outside world. Maybe it made them feel a little better, a little more normal, but I couldn't see any further than my own suffocating pain. I sat down on the edge of my bed, letting tears roll down my face, not even bothering to hold back the sobs. It hurt all the time, that physical crushing pain in my chest. Thoughts ran through my mind in an endless, cluttered stream. I'll never be better. I'll be alone forever. God, this hurts. I want it to stop. Will it ever stop? Will I ever be happy? Will anyone ever love me? Who would even want me? Why do I want anyone? All that ever gets me is more pain because no one will ever be able to take me for who I am. The door opened. I heard crying, Mike said, peering into the room. I sniffled and wiped my nose. Even though Mike was a male nurse, and a not unattractive one at that, I didn't really care what I looked like. I didn't have the energy to worry about grossing him out with my drippy nose and wrinkled clothes and unwashed hair. Are you okay? He asked. I realized no one had asked me that in almost a week. It only made me cry harder, but I didn't want Mike to see, so I covered my face in my hands. Alana, he said, do you want to talk? I nodded, still hiding my face. I know this place gets to you sometimes. It gets to me too. I heard the desk chair scrape against the carpet and moved my hands. Mike sat on the wooden chair a few feet away from my bed. I don't know, I said. I like it better here than at home. Then what's wrong, he asked. It just hurts all the time. It never stops. And no one cares. Even the nurses ignore me now. I'm not, he said. You're an exception. Mike smiled and crossed one leg over the other, leaning back. I know how you feel, he said. My dad killed himself last year, found him hanging in a closet, and ever since I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. I'm sorry, I said. Life fucking sucks sometimes. You just have to tell it to kiss your ass. I couldn't help smiling, but it fell immediately. Mike had been through something terrible, but he was getting through it. And what had I gone through? Nothing really. Yes, Simon had died, but we hadn't even been that close. My parents had gotten divorced, but that was so common. The only thing I'd really gone through was myself. My own drama, my own pain, my own chemical imbalance. That's why no one cared or related. I never had enough reasons to justify the pain I felt. It was my own creation, but I had no control over what was created. What do you want to be? Mike asked. Be? Like, what do you want to do for a job or, like, your life? I want to be a writer, I said. That's rad. What kind of writer? I don't know. I just want to write about life. I want to write about all of this. I don't want this to have been for nothing. I'd never really said it out loud that way before. It sounded a little strange, but Mike nodded. That's awesome. You should do that, but you need to make it through to do that. For the first time in a long time, I felt a little pain release from my chest. Mike stood up and patted me on the leg. I gotta keep making the rounds, but you'll be okay. I have a good feeling about you. Thank you, I said. I wanted to say more. I wanted him to know how much it meant to me to have someone show interest in something other than my mental state and diagnoses and medications. But I couldn't make the words come out. I could only watch him walk out of the room, leaving me on my own again. Thank you.